Welcome to the fourth episode of the Here We Go podcast. Today, I'm still working on position groups. We're going to talk about the offensive line. As always, I'm your host, Trent Ging. Let's dig right into it. So, obviously, the offensive line has been a major project for the last 3 seasons. The overhaul started when they brought on James Daniels, who quite frankly has turned into one of the better guards in the NFL. I'm not going to put him up in like a top five situation or anything like that. But, I mean, the guy has really been a rock solid player the entire time he's been here. It's been a pleasant surprise. There was a lot of talk when he came here about whether or not they would try to put him at center, whether they would keep him at guard. Then this offseason, they talked about moving him back to center, more from a fan's perspective. I don't think the team had ever considered that at all. So he is best left right where he's at. This guy has been the most consistent player on the offensive line for the last 3 seasons since he's come over. And we've desperately needed somebody who can anchor that line and show some consistency since David DeCastro and also since Maurkice Pouncey have retired. Now, I really like him, and I'm a little shocked that we're in the stage where they could have conversations about a contract extension. He's still young. He's only 27 years old, I believe. And basically, he's been told that they're just not even entertaining the thought of a contract extension, which is a little baffling to me and gives me some pause as to what the plan is at that position. The guard market is about to explode, and if you let him have one more really good, solid season, his value is going to be through the roof, and he's not going to be here next year. Now, at the other guard position, you still have Isaac Seumalo, who's a stud in his own rights. But he is older, and at some point, you got to figure that age is going to catch up to him. He'll be 33 this season, and I like him a lot. I really, really like him a lot. But I feel like if you were going to pay one of your two guards, which should be the case, you should pay James Daniels, and you should let Seumalo walk when the contract expires. Now, you went out and drafted a guy at guard who could be a replacement. Mason McCormick played left guard his entire collegiate career. Isaac Seumalo is our left guard. It makes sense to let Mason McCormick be the heir apparent if you believe that's what he can be, which it seems by all indications, your organization is very, very high on this kid. So if you are so high on him and you do believe that even though he was a late round pick in the fourth, not late, but middle rounds, I should say, why not pay James Daniels and let this kid learn under Seumalo? And then when the contract's up for Seumalo, you let him walk and McCormick becomes your starting left guard. Now, of course, that is putting a lot of emphasis on if you believe in this kid being a starter and not just a depth piece. I think because they brought him in for a top 30 visit and because they really put him in a situation where they've talked so highly of him, that indicates they do really, really like the kid. Is he going to be a starting caliber player in this league? I don't know. He plays with a tenacity, but that doesn't always mean anything. Everybody said Kendrick Green coming out played with a tenacity, and a lot of times that tenacity got him lunging forward and falling flat on his face. So it's not always the greatest thing in the world to just play with tenacity. You have to have some skill and some finesse to your game as well as an offensive lineman. So I'm a little baffled right now by where we're going to go with the guard position And I'm a little worried that if you let James Daniels walk in the offseason, you try to move Mason McCormick to the right guard position, we're getting right back into this whole idea of position versatility with guys who've never really shown they can be position versatile. And you get back to the Kevin Dotson issues. I mean, he was a guy who played really well at right guard. We brought in James Daniels. You moved Dotson to the left guard position, and he just wasn't good at that position. He leaves. He goes to the Rams. He goes back to right guard, and he gets a big payday because he played so well. Sometimes the Steelers try to create position versatility as opposed to actually identifying players who are position versatile. So I guess I'm a little worried, and maybe it's due to a little bit of PTSD from all the other guys that we've tried to make position versatile, like Kendrick Green, like Kevin Dotson, that just haven't worked out on this offensive line. But to me, the smarter choice would have been pay James Daniels now before the market goes up next season. And then you are going to let Seumalo finish out his contract and be on his way, which he'll be 34 years old at that point. How much more is he going to have in the tank? So far, he doesn't seem to be slowing down. He's still a very good offensive lineman, so don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to undersell how good Isaac is. I'm just saying Father Time wins 100% of the time. You have a young offensive line. You continue to build as a much younger offensive line from what we've done so far this year. It would make sense to me to keep Daniels and let Seumalo walk so that Daniels can continue to grow with this young offensive line. But for this year, the guard position is set. We're locked up, and we're in a really good spot there. So I like where we're at. I think there's absolutely nothing to worry about at the guard position. So let's move inside of those two. At one of the most talked about positions all offseason, the center position. So everybody talked all offseason, we don't have a center, we don't have a center, we don't have a center. And of course, the front office is telling us they believe in Nate Herbig. Herbig can be the guy. Herbig hasn't taken, I don't know if he's taken any live NFL snaps in real other than maybe preseason. If he has, it was very few. That's not a guy you want to thrust in there to anchor an offensive line when he's never done it before, especially a very young offensive line, because he's going to have to set the protections and help some of these young guys grow from a guy who's never played the position. That's a little bit intimidating. And that would leave you for a lot of worry. And he's not the most athletic guy in the world. He's actually the opposite. He is not athletic. He's more of a mauler. I think he would hold up pretty well, to be perfectly honest, against the big defensive linemen. But the guys who are the quick, agile guys, he's going to struggle with. I don't think anybody thought that's the guy you want going into week one as your starter. He's still going to be running with the ones, I think, going through camp and into Latrobe. But I anticipate with Zach Frazier's experience, he's going to take that position over rather quickly. If not, we might be in trouble. But I think you feel a lot better about both of our rookie offensive linemen this year as opposed to where we were last year with Broderick Jones. They have a ton of collegiate experience. They've played a lot of games. They've played a lot of snaps. Zach Frazier's no different than Troy Fautanu in that regard. So I think we're in a totally different situation. Now, Mike Tomlin is not a guy who's going to just hand over the reins to a position to a rookie. He's going to make them earn it. And you don't have to just be as good as the guy in front of you. You have to be better than the guy in front of you if you're going to play as a rookie. That's been how it's been throughout his entire tenure here. And I don't anticipate that changing just because the center position is so unsettled right now. He's going to make Frazier outplay Nate Herbig all throughout camp before he has that chance. Now, Frazier, I thought, in my opinion, was the best center in the draft. I am in the minority on this. A lot of people were very high on Jackson Powers Johnson, rightfully so. He put some really good tape out there, but he wasn't as experienced at the center position as Zach Frazier is. We do not need a developmental guy. And maybe I should say this in a different way. I felt like Zach Frazier was the best center, especially for this team, because of the need. So Jackson Powers Johnson, he's a one-year starter of the position. Grant Barton was the other guy from Duke. He was a center as a freshman, moved out to tackle, and did not play center again in college. So he's a guy who they're projecting can play really well at center because of his athleticism, but you don't know. So to me, he would have been too much of a risk at this time for our team because we have a need for a day one starter. We did not have anyone on the roster who was an actual center. This is where I think Zach Frazier, his experience, his toughness, he has some athleticism, so he's not completely immobile like Nate Herbig is. He's really going to fit this scheme too. So I think that, in my opinion, he was the guy that we had to go get. And fortunately enough for us, we didn't have to go get him. He fell to us. I think that was extremely lucky. It was a product of all these teams just going all in on quarterback in the first round. And then, of course, the wide receivers start flying off the board. And the more that happened, the more it pushed a guy like Zach Frazier down the list. And that's really what was a benefit to us. And very, very fortunate that we didn't have to try to make a trade to go get him. So it was great to find him in the second round. There are people who talk about what round should you draft a center in. I don't see a problem with drafting a center in the second round. I think that the problem is when you stretch to go get a guy in the first round. And I was really worried that we were going to try to oversell ourselves and go after Grant Barton, to be perfectly honest with you, and take him. Even at 20, I felt was too high. Again, you're projecting a guy as a center, and you don't know. And he can look the part, act the part, talk the part, but until you see the pads on and see him in live action, you don't know what he is. And really, we won't know what Zach Frazier is until we see the same thing. But I feel like you are more comfortable with a guy that has that much experience in the position, played in the Big 12, so he's played against NFL caliber talent, and you can project him a little bit better and more accurately because you have so much more tape on a guy like that. So I felt really comfortable with Zach Frazier. Jackson Powers Johnson had some injury history stuff that really kind of came up late in the draft process that gave me pause that I didn't feel real good about. And I feel like our team has taken too many risks with injury history guys, especially as of late. So I think Frazier's going to be a perfect fit. I think he's a guy that you can plug and play for 10 years. And after this battle is over between he and Nate Herbig, I don't know that you're going to hear too many people talk too much about the center position because he's going to fill that role well. And if you're not being talked about as an offensive lineman, that's a good thing. And that's what Zach Frazier is going to do. He's going to come in, he's going to do his job, he's going to do it well, he's going to go home. Now, here's where things get quite intriguing to me. It's been a big talk already. It's going to continue to be a big talk until week 1 comes out and the starters are announced. Last year, we drafted Broderick Jones. Everyone knows this. He was drafted to be the left tackle of the future. We had the incumbent in Dan Moore Jr. Dan Moore's track record and performance speak for themselves. He has not been very good. This year, we draft Troy Faletanu. Now, Troy Faletanu and Broderick Jones are coming from 2 totally different places in their collegiate careers. Broderick Jones was not a long-time starter. He did not log a ton of snaps. He was more of a project draft pick with extreme athleticism and a ton of upside. Troy Faletanu is also incredibly athletic. He is looked at in the draft almost like a positionless guy because he is so flexible and was talked about as being a guy who could play all 5 positions up and down that offensive line. So much so that when he was drafted, there was a lot of people saying he was going to be drafted to be the center, not to play tackle. Now, when I watched the combine this year, he really stood out to me because you could tell in all of these drills that they were running, he was incredibly athletic. And not only was he athletic, but he was very fluid compared to some of the other guys. You could tell they were really working to get going and starting and stopping. And it looked like what you would expect from a guy who is 300 or well over 300 pounds. Troy Faletanu didn't look that way. Troy looked very fluid. And I was becoming intrigued by him to the point to where I remember I was cleaning the house a bit. And I got yelled at by my wife because I'm like sitting in front of the TV watching this man move. And I'm like, my goodness, he moves well for a big guy. So I got myself in a little bit of trouble, but I was just so like enamored with the way he was just moving so fluidly in and out of these drills that really are drills that are more designed for other position players like the, linebackers, wide receivers, running backs, guys that you're really going to try to judge when they're in space. Outside of a guy who's pulling, I mean, the offensive line doesn't get out in space often. So on run plays, the pull plays, on the pass plays, it's more of the screen game. But I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, this guy would be a killer in the screen game. And then you start watching film on him, and he was. I mean, there was a video that was going around there for a while of him just absolutely destroying a cornerback. I mean, that's a guy who's a big man out in space who located his guy on target, and, I mean, he met him clean. And that's a guy you can get excited about. Again, going back to the Tomlin thing, though, who's going to start and where will they start? That's going to be really the intriguing battle of camp for me because I do enjoy offensive line play. I feel like as a fan, it was easy to take for granted the offensive lines that we had when we had Pouncey and DeCastro and Villanueva and Ramon Foster and Marcus Gilbert. I mean, those guys they made it look easy, and you took for granted how good that offensive line was until they were gone. And I really want to get back to enjoying our offensive line moving the line of scrimmage, protecting the quarterback consistently, and giving our offense a chance to get going and do the things that we want to do. So this tackle battle is going to be a huge, huge piece to this. there is a very real possibility Dan Moore Jr. is the day one starter again. Because Mike Tomlin does not like to start rookies. So is Mike Tomlin really going to want to start two rookies on the offensive line? Now, if it were up to me, I would not ease them in the way that he did Broderick Jones. I would start both rookies right off the bat. I would move Broderick Jones back to the left side where he's comfortable. I would move Troy Falatanu to the right side. Because of how athletically gifted he is, I believe he's going to make that switch rather easily and start Zach Frazier at center. Let this offensive line begin to gel at the beginning of the season. I don't want to see us wait half the season and then say Dan Moore Jr. is playing the same way he's played for the last 3 seasons and say we need to make a change so we can protect the quarterbacks a little bit better or establish more of the running game or whatever it may be. And then say, okay, Troy, we're going to throw you out there right into the teeth of the schedule where it gets rough. Let's play this thing smart. Let's start those guys day one and let this offensive line begin to gel together. Typically, lines take a couple of years. We don't have a couple of years. Every week spent without our rookies in the lineup, to me, is a mistake. Now, I'll say this about Dan Moore Jr. And watching his play, I never thought I would say anything positive about Dan Moore Jr., to be perfectly honest. But that guy has been the ultimate teammate. I mean, talk about a guy who not only has seen one guy drafted to replace him, but 2 guys drafted to ensure this guy doesn't make it on the field. And he's spending his day and night mentoring them. That's a hell of a teammate. I mean, that is one hell of a teammate. And everyone talking about, let's trade him before the season starts. Let's get him off the roster. Let's get him out of the equation so Tomlin has to start the 2 rookies. Listen, a guy who, for better or worse, has 3 years of experience, if that is your backup, that is a damn good backup. And he's cheap. Why would you get rid of him at this point? You're not going to get much back in trade compensation for him right now. I think people are going to be surprised as to the price tag he gets in the offseason. I think it's going to be higher than people expect. But you should not dump a guy who costs a little over $1 million against the cap, who is literally tutoring your young offensive lineman. I mean, in-game experience matters, and you can pass something along. Even if you're not playing the position well, you can have the knowledge and maybe just not have the physical gifts to do the job. I've not heard anybody say anything about Dan Moore's knowledge being an issue. His play is an issue. Let him pass along this information to these young guys. Let him talk to them on the sidelines when they come off the field and help them and be another coach for them. So I think all this talk about getting rid of him is absolute nonsense. It is just typical overreaction crap that you see. And who else is going to be your swing tackle? Dylan Cook's your next best player likely on the roster. He's a guy really who hasn't logged a ton of snaps in the NFL. I'd rather have the guy who got 3 years of starting experience on the roster. And I get it. The argument's going to be, oh, well, he can't play on the right. Who cares? If you have 2 young tackles who are comfortable going on both sides, which Broderick Jones has been on record this offseason saying, I will play right tackle if that's where they want me to play. The more he gets to play over there, the more comfortable he gets over there. And he's talked about this stuff. Listen to the interviews. If Troy Falatanu gets hurt, Broderick moves over to right, Dan Moore comes back in at left, and you're not completely crippled. It's not your best lineup, but you can still go win games because you have won games before with Dan Moore. If Broderick Jones gets hurt, Dan Moore just slides right in a left tackle and nothing changes. So I think it's a huge mistake for everyone out there saying, let's get rid of Dan Moore the same way we did with Kevin Dotson and Kendrick Green. And I mean, sometimes you need a guy who's going to mentor your young guys. And Dan Moore has been an absolute perfect teammate. I mean, a perfect teammate. I couldn't say anything better about Dan Moore Jr. with the way he's handled this situation. It cannot be easy. And Broderick Jones has talked about, yeah, they're all in a competition together, but they're friends outside of this. That's very rare. It's very rare. And I think that's due in part to the way that Dan Moore has handled things. You keep that guy around. Now, if Dan Moore was in a contract situation similar to Nate Herbig, okay, I'm listening to you guys saying, let's trade him, let's get him out of here, let's move on from him. That's fine, but that's not where his situation's at. And I'm a little shocked. Now, I do have a friend that I talk back and forth with on X, and he's been advocating for a while now to dump Nate Herbig in his contract. Now, I can listen to those talks, and I can agree with what he's saying. He is paid very highly for a backup, very highly. Probably way too much, especially for what he's brought to the table and the fact that he's not played. So I can get on board with something like that. And if you say, you know, who's going to be the backup if you trade Nate Herbig, I mean, you got to figure developing a guy like Spencer Anderson, or if you truly believe in this Mason McCormick kid, then he's your backup guard. There's talks that he's worked out at center at some point, which I don't know that I believe that, but at the same time, like, Herbig is definitely overpaid to be a backup. So I can understand those things, but I am super intrigued by not only the battle between Zach Frazier and Nate Herbig, which I think it's going to be short. I think within the time frame of Latrobe, we see Zach Frazier with the ones. I think he wins that competition with the ones as they start filtering him in. So I think that one's going to be short. And then I'm really excited to see what his growth looks like, because he does have the experience, and you hope he catches on quickly. But the center position is extraordinarily difficult. It's one of the toughest positions in football to come in as a rookie and play and start and be able to make all the calls. And there's a lot to learn in that position, which is where a guy like Russell Wilson can help him. He is a veteran. He understands offenses. And as long as you feel comfortable, Russell Wilson has a clear understanding of where the calls and the protections need to be, you know, you can slide a rookie in there and let that veteran quarterback help him make calls if that's what you need to do. There's a chance Zach picks it all up and Zach's completely fine. But the real intriguing thing to me is going to be this tackle competition. And what does Mike Tomlin do with the tackle competition? And do we go in week one with Dan Moore Jr. being a starter again? Boy, I hope not. But the way that Tomlin's done it in years past, I could see it happening. So I would love to know all your thoughts on this. Like to know where everybody stands, especially with Dan Moore Jr. I really wish people would give him a little bit more credit for the teammate that he's been, instead of only looking at just his play. It's something that goes beyond the numbers. So send me your feedback. If you enjoy the content, please like and share. I hope everybody has a wonderful day.